Great. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first sharing session of 2026. Happy New Year to you all, and I hope that you have had a great start to the year. Thanks for joining this Product People event. Before starting, please remember you can watch the stream from YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. And also a reminder that after this talk, the recording will be shared afterwards so that you can share it with your fellow PMs. We also have a Slido running for you to ask questions directly, which our speaker will be able to answer. And so I'm going to get straight to it. I'll have a bit of an introduction, and then Quentin will be able to begin. So Quentin François he's a CPO at, apologies if I'm not saying this correctly, but Robeauté. And he's joining us today to speak about building medical devices from 0 to 1, which I am particularly very intrigued. I have a background in this space, so I'm really keen to hear his insights and to get going with that. But before doing so, I'll just give you a quick introduction from me. So my name's Sarah. I'm a product management consultant at Product People. There's various different project and product experience I've had at various clients. But as mentioned now is that I also have a bit of a background in biomedical engineering, actually, this makes it super interesting, this call in particular. And yeah, I'm looking forward for the sharing session, and please stay in touch and connect with us on LinkedIn. So what does Product People do? So our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great products faster. We do interim product management services where we provide this support through our in-house staff. And how do we give back? And this is actually one of the sessions that how we're doing it right now. We empower our product management community to share knowledge through these kind of sharing sessions and also through our many events. So this is just a brief introduction to Product People. We're also not limited into just product management, but also product owner, ops, or product leaders. And we onboard fast, align quickly, and deliver outcomes which add value to your company. So, however, we want to get to know you. So we want to lead into the session, have a bit of an icebreaker. So I would like to ask a question, and please just, scan the QR code here to the Slido. And the question is, what do you think is the hardest part of building an early stage medical device? Is it A, getting meaningful clinical feedback early, B, navigating regulatory and approval pathways, C, building something clinicians actually adopt, or D, knowing when the product is good enough to test in the real world? So please, there's no right or wrong answer. We'd love to get your input and feedback in this. And I mean, I'm tending to think between actually building something clinicians actually adopt, because what's the point of building something if it actually doesn't get used? But then I also know there's massive red tape within the space too. So the regulatory hurdles and approval is also a whole different ballgame. So I'll see what the answers are coming in. And if you can't join via the QR code, you can also go to slido.com with the code 9311121. Great. I'll give it about a few minutes and then. Okay, so we have some answers coming in, and we have 83%. Which is navigating regulatory and approval pathways, and C at 70. A and D no one has voted for that. So actually quite interesting. Maybe I should have kept my thoughts to myself. But yeah, I will then start, and go ahead and hand it over to Quentin. I'm really interested to hear about the chat and very excited. So I'll give it to you and take it away. Yeah, thank you so much, and we'll chat back after the presentation.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. So I'll try to share a bit about what we have learned at Robeauté over the past 8 years of development of our medical device from 0 to 1. So we started 8 years ago with just an idea. And so you can see on the picture what we are developing, but I will show a video after that to give you some context. So to give you a first point is currently in medical device, we are regulated. So it's like the space, it's like other safety industry where you can't really release a product without following any validation to a third party. And so it's something that is adding some constraints into product development. And so the idea of this talk is to take into account this regulation layer and try to give you some, I would say, insights about how you can do that, even if regulation is present at each step of the process. So the reality of the domain of early stage medtech, so when you have an idea and you want to start building a product, is that as it is regulated, there is few solutions on the market. And so there is a huge potential for a monopoly when you have something, and that could have a high impact on the society. So let's take an example about some recent drugs, like the Ozempic drug for being obese. It's like releasing the drug at the beginning was the only drug on the market, and so there was a huge monopoly, a huge market for just one player. The growth was really, really high, and they had a high impact on the society. But the problem is that there are long cycle of development because the regulation is imposing several steps of safety validation to be sure that there is no error, because when you're operating or when you're taking a drug, you don't want it to be tested not really extensively, I would say. And so you want the solution and the product to be as effective as possible. And by that, I mean close to 100%. So this is the context of the whole domain of medical device. And I was talking about drug, that's the same for biotech. And so now I will just run a small video about what is Robeauté, and we'll focus a bit on Robeauté. So as you understood, so we are talking about the brain and the operation within it. So we started 8 years ago because Bertrand, that you saw in the video, the CEO of Robeauté, has lost someone really close to him due to glioblastoma, which is the main aggressive brain tumor. The current survival time of these patients are currently 18 months, even if we have really good solutions into the medtech and drug space, but the brain tumors are really, really complex to treat. So if we zoom and we look at the big picture, currently in the world, there is more than 1 billion people that are affected by brain disease. So into that, we consider all neuro-oncology, so brain tumors, the neurodegenerative that are Parkinson, Alzheimer related, psychiatry, and vascular disease. You probably know someone that has been affected by one of these diseases. So it's a really, really, really huge problem in the society. But we decided to focus, due to the history, but also to the unmet need, on the oncology, so on the brain tumors. So that's representing 350,000 new people per year affected, and almost 70% of these persons are dying each year. So the survivors are very low. And so the physicians need to understand how the tumor is behaving to then define the best treatment. And then the second point that we saw from the beginning is that the surgeons cannot really access in a flexible way the brain tumors. So we have built a solution that is pretty classical in medtech. So you have a platform that is powered by a console that you can see with a screen, something that is enabling the surgeon to interact with the device. We have built a cap system that is a system to insert a microrobot into the brain that you can see on the right. And this system has a part that is working like a GPS system to follow the position of the microrobot to guide it into the brain. And so with this platform, the microrobot can navigate in 3D along curves within the neurons, within the cells of the brain, and can execute multiple actions. So as you can see, the value proposition is really defined around 4 elements of this platform. For this platform is the micro-invasiveness, so there is no harm done to the brain. It's really micro-precise. So as it is a micro-robot, the precision is at the same level. It's able to go with sub-millimetric accuracy. So it's really important if you consider that a neuron is like 1/10 of a millimeter. You want to operate at the size and the precision of a small group of cells. The third value that we see is that it can collect data locally, so within the brain, which is really key today to understand how the cells are behaving and the tumors are behaving. And the fourth element is that it is a flexible and ambulatory system. So it means that you can move the system within the hospital, and that could enable the surgeon to then just operate the patient for a small amount of time and then go out of the operating room and follow the patient within the room to then monitor him. So our starting point at Robeauté in terms of product development, thanks to then based on the context I gave you, is that we started with an unmet need. So the patients having brain tumors have a very small survival time. There is a radical tech proposition, which is totally different to the needles that was shown in the video. So it's a micro robot that is able to navigate in 3D thanks to a lot of micro technologies within it. There is no market references. We are really opening a new category. So it's, in terms of product development, it's a bit complex, and there is no playbook then. So in terms of product development, again, a bit complex to, I would say, to put the new steps, even if you have the regulation that is guiding you or constraining you a bit in terms of that. So the question was how to start, to then define this first principle and the first design to then get to the point that what I was showing you. So the first point that I wanted to share is that we decided to start with degraded prototypes. So we started to think to solutions, but as engineers, we knew that what we would imagine won't be probably the best solution for the surgeons and the users. So we started to, as we say, ship learning and not ship prototyping. So we were doing really quick prototypes. So that could take that could take the shape of a design that you build on the computer and then you show on paper to surgeons. That could take the shape of just having questions about what is the best interaction form. Is it a PS4 controller? Is it a specific interaction system that you want? That could be also a workflow, so a map of the different actions to use the microrobot, and then ask feedback on that to the surgeons, to the users. So it helps us to validate the first rough ideas and rough concepts, to then start to focus and converge to several concepts to guide the development. And the last point is that what I was saying is that we used 100% fake elements, because at the beginning we had nothing, and building a microrobot from zero was taking a lot of time. So we didn't have the prototypes working at the time, but we had to advance into product discovery, and so we used designs. So I took some examples to show you what we have done. So on the top right, you can see, for example, the interactions and the questions and the feedback that we got on the controllers. So we worked on haptic feedback, screens, direct contact with the tissue, the feedback that we have with other robotics system, and the PlayStation control that you can see, which is finally the decision that the controller that we took based on the feedback we got. You can see on the bottom on the top left, sorry, the first initial design that we were using to show how the cab, the mom, the console was our ID, and what we showed to the surgeon. You can see the different feedback in color around that we got at this time. It was approximately 5 years ago. And the medical workflow, so the main step to use the device and the timing we thought was pertinent. And then the learning on the workflow on the bottom right. So that was the initial step, and that allowed us to start to converge towards something more specific. Then the thing is that you want to have feedback loops that are very tight and so very fast. So what we have done is in 5 steps, is that you have the hypothesis. So I think that, for example, the ideal controller is a PS4 controller. So then you build a prototype. So that could be a fake, that could be a design, as I showed, a 3D printing system, if this is a part, or a code, if it is a software you want to code. So even with AI now, you can vibe code some things. So for example, for the PS4 controller, we decided to code a small game to pilot a microrobot in 3D into an MRI, so a brain image. And we gave to the surgeon the PS4 controller with a computer, and we made them play the game and see if they were able to control the robot. And then we got the feedback live about, oh, the orientation is very complex with the joystick, or I cannot really see the speed that I'm piloting. So having a small prototype that is really fast to I would say to code, to build, and then get directly to validation. So the third step is internal validation. So of course, when you have a prototype, you test it, or you evaluate it internally into the team. So that could be lab tests for us, bench test, or even going to cadaver in the OR. And then 4 is surgeon feedback. So it's a real external validation. So that could be just a discussion with the surgeon at the beginning, like a user interview, but hands-on. That could be going to OR to operate a cadaver, an animal, or something else. And then if that's not enough, you repeat the cycle, or you go to VNV. So VNV in medtech is verification and validation. So it's specific steps to validate your product following the regulation, asking, I would say, you to follow the norms to then guarantee the safety of the usage of your device. So this is the second point. So the optimal is that if you have a surgeon in the loop by design, so from the beginning, you will be able to then call the surgeon or have very tight feedback loop, because you can then build a prototype as fast as you can and then call the surgeon organize a small, I would say, hands-on session to discuss that, and then iterate. So the current pace that we have at Robeauté, depending on the subject, is between 1 and 2 weeks. So that's pretty fast, and that allows us to have multiple versions, and then that enables us to start from zero and then converge progressively, and I would say with data, towards something that is robust. So as an example, and it's a pretty recent one, so we thought that we had a design that is for the cap that you can see bottom left with some U shape and a system in the middle to insert the tool and the microrobot. And finally, we received some elements that were smaller than expected from a supplier, and an engineer into the team went with an idea to go to mini UCAP, so what you can see at the top left, which is everything integrated in a small round. And as a team, we were saying that's not a good idea because you will have to change everything, and so we were a bit reluctant to that, but we decided to just 3D print the two systems, so fake systems, and bring it to conference and show that to surgeons. And with our surprise, finally the mini UCAP was totally validated by the surgeons, and so we decided to switch the design thanks to the questions you see on the right. We switched the design to the mini UCAP because of the feedback that we received. And so this is an example that shows you how we can have tight feedback loop to continue iterating and stay flexible. So the third one is that preclinical. So this is typical for medical work. Is that when you're going to preclinical, so that's mainly animal or cadaver trial. Generally, that's used as validation. So when you have done multiple tests in the lab and you're going to that test to validate that it's still working. So we decided to use preclinical as product design, so to confront ourselves to the reality, because what we saw and what we heard from others, colleagues and other startups, is that the feedback that is given by the users is generally different from how they behave in reality. And we saw the same, is that they are saying something as a qualitative feedback when you discuss with them, but when they test the system in a real life, in the operating room, they behave differently and they have a different feedback. And so we decided to switch from user interview as often as possible, when it's possible, to real conditions, because it's better validation and more robust validation of your hypothesis. So then the question, as I write at the bottom, is how to execute as fast as possible preclinical trials. And so you should optimize your company to be able to go on real conditions and test as much as you can, as fast as you can. So the optimal is confront yourself at the reality as much as you can. And so to give you an idea, the current pace that we have at Robeauté, depending on the subject and the ability of the team, is between 2 and 4 weeks per test. So this type of test is generally requiring a protocol writing for multiple days, reviewing, signing into the company, booking an operating room at a supplier, having a subject. So everything is a bit, in terms of, I would say logistic is not as simple. So it's pretty good results, we think. So I had some examples, but in terms of what we are doing. So, for example, we are doing real conditions because doing a biopsy, so getting measures into the brain is not the same into butcher brain than the real brains. The mechanics is not the same between cadavers and living brains, so the results that we have are different. Inserting a microrobot into a gel is not the same as a living brain, and everything that you see here is something we discovered during the test. And so it's really key to confront you to the reality. The number 4 and the last one is that the narrow focus beats the big vision, and that the speed to execute and to demonstrate the feasibility and the validation of your product at early stage is really key. So it's really difficult because the regulation tricks a bit that, because you want to, I would say, follow the rules, to follow the regulation, but having a small niche enables you to go faster because you can, as it is written at the bottom, see and target really defined unmet needs for a small group of patients, and then define a clear value proposition that would enable the regulation and the regulatory bodies like FDA in the US or EMA in the EU to read your dossier and your value proposition in a simple way. So that would enable you to then focus a small number of patients and then go very fast in terms of execution and not carry a lot of use case from the beginning. So the optimal would be execute as fast as possible within a clear niche, so very short term, like some years in medtech, and then drive through a strong vision to expand to several use cases. So, for example, so at Robeauté, we start with a small group of patients for biopsy to measure brain tumors. That's called progression, and we target approximately 6% of the market that we could target if we go for the full indication. And this is a strategic decision because we save 2 years to go to market thanks to this decision, even if we target a small market. But then we think that expanding the market is lower burden for the company than going for the full indication from the beginning. So just before finishing, I wanted to give you another point of view. So I'm helping to build another startup in the dental domain. So it's still medtech domain, but it's in dental solutions. And so what I saw is that the cycles between prototyping to clinical tests in this domain is maximum 1 week if you're fast. So it's faster than in neuro for Robeauté. It's totally logical due to the constraints and the easiness to go to a fake mouth for the dentist to test. And so the speed and the cost are totally optimized into this domain for the innovation. And to give you an idea, the full development of a whole device has probably cost around 600K euros, and we will be able to go to market with this amount of money. So to give you an idea, it's just something that the dentist will manipulate with his hand. There is a suction cup, as you can see at the end, to manipulate small prostheses that the dentist has to place into the teeth of the patient. And so this use case is, I would say, at the opposite of Robeauté, something really simple, and where you can see that the speed and the cost are more optimized. But on the other hand, the market and I would say the moat of the technology that is developed is smaller. So just to finish, the 5 points the 5 takeaways I would say is don't wait for the real product to learn and validate because you will wait for, I would say, your whole life before the real product will go out. So you need to find shortcuts to learn and validate before the real product is happening, especially in medtech, because there is a lot of regulation. Build feedback loops into regulations, so not against it. So build a feedback loop with users and learn and get the data that will then nurture the regulation dossier to prove that you have done all the tests and all the discussions with the user. Use the preclinical, so the test on animals, cadaver as design space, not just validation. Enable you to learn on real conditions from the beginning and not after multiple steps. Start with that. Focus your clinical scope brutally, so don't go for the full market from the beginning, but start with a small niche to go as fast as possible and gain multiple years into your roadmap and then expand. And the last one is optimize for learning and validation velocity, because that is what is creating value for your company. Thanks for listening to me, and so now we can switch to Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Quentin. That was super insightful. And you've definitely left us with some 5 takeaway golden nuggets. And I'm sure there's a lot of other questions that are burning. So we'll get to those now. So I just want to thank the audience for listening to the presentation. And you can now share your questions with us. So as always, scan the QR code, or you can go onto slido.com and put the code in to answer or ask Quentin any questions that maybe you have. So whilst you are thinking about which questions to ask, let's talk about just some of the use cases that we that we cover, and maybe you or your company, or you know somebody that would need us and would like to work with us. So we cover parental leaves. We are also able to scale product management team quickly, and we're also able to lead key initiatives while bridging the gap between until a full-time employee joins. So we offer different support, and this can be either interim or fractional support, which is a product manager or product leader. And that can be to cover permanent positions until one is hired, as I mentioned, parental leave or important initiatives. And then we also have the coach or advisor or consultant, and that's also to coach your team or optimize your processes and programs in either program management or product ops. Also product discovery experts. So we can assist you in running discovery to uncover your next impactful initiative or product to add into your product lines. So here are some previous B2C clients that we have worked with. And you can also feel free to also go onto our website to see some of our case studies from these. And here are some other clients that we have worked with. You'll be able to see some familiar names in all of these. And just about our team, here's some important stats about our company. We have supported over 690 cross-functional teams and 130 clients, from startups to scale-ups and publicly listed. We have 40 product leaders and managers, and these are all in-house to ensure that we have quality of service for our clients, and also a strong career path for our team. And there's 59% of women in the team and 60% in leadership. We take pride in it. We promote from within and hire more women than average, thanks to our skills before CVs process. Great. So if you need us, you know where to find us as always. And please always connect. So let's get back to the questions. And I will ask the first one to Quentin now. Quentin, I hope you are ready. Okay. What signals or criteria tell you that a clinical need is genuinely unmet and is worth solving with a medical device?
So basically, when we talk with the FDA in the US and we interact on this notion with them, is that there is no solution that is answering a need. So typically, if we take the brain tumors for Robeauté, there is a solution on the market enabling them to gain 6 months of survival compared to the 12 months. So that's, I would say, they are getting to 18 months, but that's nothing compared to the 10 or 20 years they could live. So they see a huge gap between the 6 months they could gain and the 20 years we could get. And so this is then the definition of unmet need.
Okay, great. How long does it take to go from idea to a usable, approved medical device? So from the very beginning to when, I know it's long and it's costly.
So,
yeah.
I would say it's becoming an art to go really fast between these stages. but it depends on the domain. So the neuro domain is the hardest one, probably, due to the fact that the brain organ is very sensitive. And so the level of safety and reassurance that you have to provide is so high. But then the monopoly and the actors on the market are very few. And so the value of the company is growing a lot compared to other domains. So you would need a lot of capital and a lot of money to execute these steps. But at the same time, then that's billions, that billion market just for you. And so in the timing, what we see when we study the medical robotics in general, not just neuro, it's between 10 and 15 years between ID and market adoption, I would say. It's not go to market, because you can go to market, sell 2 robots, and there is no adoption. And then you need multiple years to then shift the market. So I would say between 10 and 15 years. So that's really, really long story compared to other domains like AI or applications.
Just before we get into another question, I just want to ask that, how do you also ensure, you're talking about obviously the clinicians actually adopting to your technology, right? And
yeah.
And other tools. How do you face clinicians?
So sorry, you were just a bit frozen. So the question is about how you ensure that you won't like face or I would say barriers to adoption with clinicians. Yeah. So
yeah, and also I mean, robots in the space, for some that have never used it, it's also quite scary and intimidating, right? So
yeah.
how do we know that, hey, it's not taking over your job, or it's actually, you know, how do you ensure that?
It's a huge problem because in the medtech generally the user is not the payer, so you have to convince the hospital to pay, or the system in Europe. In the US it's more private, so it's the hospital that is taking the decision. And then the user is the surgeon, and the surgeon is not paid more, I would say, based on the decision of buying the system, or it could be, but generally it's not linked. So you have to convince multiple actors at the same time. So you need to convince the hospital that they will gain money, or that they will be able to operate more people. You need to convince the surgeon that they will be able to, I would say, operate in a better way. So that could be better position for them, shorter operation, better precision. So there is a value proposition for each actor that you have to define. And of course, one of the big value for the surgeon is not changing their habits. And so you have to stick to what they learned. And this is a profession that is really typical, like I would say hand-driven profession, is that you learn with someone generally. And you learn by seeing how someone is doing, and they do that. And so there are different schools, I would say, in the world of how they do a specific operation. And so you have to stick and to understand how they behave. And that's, I would say, that's why there is a huge value to be product manager and to have a product manager in this space, because being a product manager and getting to OR, seeing how they operate, seeing what are their workflows and their pain points is really key to define the value proposition and how you would sell the platform and the solution to each one.
Great. Yeah, and I think this leads on to the next question is, how did you create degraded prototypes of such devices in 1 to 2 week iterations? Did you use any specific methodologies such as design sprints?
Yeah, so it's naturally a sprint, even if it's not really organized like that. But typically, you have a discussion with on your first ideas with someone, and then into the discussion, like an idea popped up about what if you do that. And I think it's not done, or it's not well done like that. I would say, something to manipulate more precisely, or an indicator to see the orientation of something I will put into the brain. And so this type of thing is really easy to simulate. So you can ask one of your engineer, and that's what we are doing, like to 3D print just a rough ID, and then you fix a short moment. You say you have 2 days to do it and print it, even if that's not perfect. And so that's how we frame it. And then we take the meeting with the surgeon, with our surgeon, like we say, okay, we see each other in 2 weeks. And so you have a buyer, or I would say you have a deadline, even if that's the deadline you decided. And that keeps the momentum, I would say.
Great. What's the biggest misconception people have about regulatory pathways when building medical devices from scratch?
I would say I would take mine to answer, but probably different person would have different ones. But the misconception would be that regulatory are constraints, and I think I said that during the presentation even. It's constraints, but let's imagine that's your grandmother that is operated tomorrow. You want the regulation to exist to be sure that the operation will go in a good way. So I would say that the misconception would be that regulation is something that is really heavy. It's in part true, I would say, but if you understand the concept of the regulation, the steps, it's finally pretty flexible, and you can do I would say your own system into it by following the norms. And I would say that of course it's creating longer cycles of startup and of development, and then you have to commit for more years on a project to get the results and to get to patients. But I would say that at the same time, the reward is largely bigger. So it's a bit I would say the misconception is that probably it's constraining the market, but I would say it's more like distorting it in having fewer competition in the later stage. And generally, you at the beginning you see that with the wrong eye, but when you are in the steps, it's also reassuring that you can follow a specific, I would say, pathway and guidelines. And when you pass the steps, you know that you invest specific amount of money and amount of time to then go to the next step, and then you get to clinical, then you get to validation with the FDA. That's saying you can go to market, then you get to insurance to negotiate with them. And so I would say at the same time, it helps you to have the roadmap.
Yeah. And I think your presentation hit a great point in saying that, don't work against the regulations, work with it, and, don't see it as a constraint, and, early on, know what the requirements are. And so you can build that into your whole design. I also know you also brought up about, using some of that initial work to put into documentation, which I see there's actually a question on LinkedIn about this. And I know to start early documentation is crucial, especially for some of these regulatory bodies. But there's a question here asking which parts of your discovery phase results can you actually leverage to populate the documentation required by the notified bodies for certification?
So typically, we are going into phase 2 and phase 3 of what we call the design control. So it's how you control the design phases of your device. And so into that, you have to provide usability data. So how your device will be usable and how you checked that it is usable as you expect it to be. And so all of the user interviews that we have done and some examples that I showed you are data that are currently in slide deck that I use to present to the others in the company after a batch of user interviews. And so thanks to AI, and I will just shape the data in another way to then create reports, review them, and then provide that to the team for the regulatory dossier. So typically, all the product discovery data about they prefer to use a PS4 controller, but why? Here are the quotes that I got during my user interviews, and so these data are directly even copy-pasted in some way, I would say, into the regulatory dossier. And that's the justification that we could use for the design choices.
Great. And then when we go into, clinical approval and clinical checks, so this is the next question we also have is, how do you define a clinical check for your micro robot today? What has to be true to say this has passed?
Yeah, so now you enter into, so in the end, it's a negotiation between the regulatory body and your company, following the norms. So as I said, it's pretty flexible. And so in the end, to find the best number of operation, you have to then provide hypothesis reassurance data on the lab, from the lab, and then you can define the ethical number, because you could go to 1,000 animal you want to operate to be sure that's going every time well, but there is no sense to do that in terms of economy. No one will finance that. So you will block totally the innovation in the improvement of the treatment of the patient. But and at the opposite, if you say I'm doing that on 2 animals and saving a lot of money, going fast to innovation and to market and to clinics, there is no sense to do it for 2 animals, because then you won't cover a lot of, I would say, edge cases. And so generally what we do, as we go to science and we use statistics to study the variation and the problems that we can get. So for example, for us, as we are in the brain, we consider 0 as the failure level that we want. So we have to guarantee that there is 0 failure on the core device. And so for that, when you get into the statistics, you end up with a number of 59 tests that you have to carry out that are all passed. And then you can say, okay, this has passed. And then I can guarantee at 3%, I would say, confidence of interval of confidence that this device will always be working. So you finally use, as in any clinical trial, or when you, for example, for the COVID vaccine, they did that with at the beginning with a lot of patients, because they didn't have time, and so they enlarge the exposure to then get all the data in a small amount of time.
Great. Thank you so much, Quentin. We have to unfortunately wrap things up. I could continue this conversation, ask questions for days. We can share our learnings, but it really has been super insightful. So thank you for being so generous with sharing your knowledge and sharing insights. And I'm sure everyone can connect with you on LinkedIn if they want to have any more further questions.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Great. So as we wrap up, we want to just show that we are hiring. And so you can feel free to scan this QR code to look at any of the open positions that we have. And then also please subscribe to our newsletter. There's cool product stories there. And we'll also share some of our learnings there too. So feel free to scan those QR codes to directly link you to those appropriate sites. And then join us next week for our second live stream session of the year, which is about mental health for product managers with Gaurav Rajani, head of product at Motorola Solutions Germany. Same time, same place, you can find us. And yeah, I wish everyone else a great start of the new year. Quentin, all the best for your new year, and we're excited to see what's happening next. Again, thank you so much and really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.